There is a silence that lives just beyond the edge of what we know. It is an ancient silence, older than thought, and within it stirs the oldest and most profound of human emotions, fear. Not the fear of a known danger, but a deeper, more fundamental tremor of the soul, the fear of the unknown. For our earliest ancestors, the world was a tapestry of mysteries. The rising sun, the changing seasons, the birth of a child, the sting of death, all were unpredictable, all were governed by forces beyond comprehension. This unpredictable unknown became an omnipotent source of both blessings and calamities. To give it a face, the ancient Greeks crafted their pantheon of gods, beings of immense power and capricious will. They prayed to them, sought to appease them, for an unhappy god was a source of terror. But then a shift occurred. A few curious minds began to look past the gods, seeking explanations not in the whims of deities, but in the consistent, underlying principles of nature itself. They were the first natural philosophers, the ancestors of our scientists, and science, in its relentless march, has since illuminated so much of the darkness, answering questions that had plagued humanity for millennia. Yet, in the process of lighting these candles, it revealed the true, staggering scale of the surrounding darkness. It showed us not a small, cozy world, but an immeasurable cosmos, vast and cold, and largely indifferent to our existence. It was into this newly scientific, yet profoundly terrifying universe that a writer named Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born, and he gave this cosmic fear a new language. He understood that the true horror was not in the vampires and ghosts of folklore, but in the chilling implications of a universe so immense that humanity was reduced to a fleeting, insignificant speck. His stories are not about the things that go bump in the night. They are about the void that echoes back after the bump, a void that is conscious, ancient, and utterly alien. Lovecraft's own life was a rehearsal for this cosmic dread. He was a vessel perfectly crafted to receive these anxieties. An insecure and sickly boy, his childhood was steeped in shadows. When he was just 3 years old, his father was committed to a mental asylum after a psychotic episode, and would later die of syphilis. This early brush with madness and institutionalization planted a seed of instability. In response, his mother, Sarah, became fiercely overprotective, swaddling him in a smothering layer of anxiety, never letting him far from her sight. It was his maternal grandfather, Whipple Van Buren Phillips, who became the sun in his young universe. He introduced the boy to the worlds of classical literature, poetry, and strange tales. It was he, ironically, who helped the fearful young Lovecraft overcome his terror of the dark. But this light was temporary. Lovecraft was precocious, reciting poetry at 2, reading at 3, writing by 6. He found solace not in the company of other children, but in the silent, vast company of books in his private library. Then, death visited again. The passing of his grandmother cast the family into a permanent state of gloom, a gloom from which Lovecraft would later say he never recovered. His mother and aunts dressed in black, and the house became a tomb. It was in this atmosphere that his nightmares began vivid, terrifying visions of creatures he called night gaunts. They would snatch him up, carrying him through infinite leagues of black air over the spires of dead and horrible cities, only to drop him onto the needle-like peaks of enormous mountains in a grey, formless void. He would wake up screaming. These were not just bad dreams. They were visitations, rehearsals for the fictional horrors he would later commit to paper. The foundation of his world shattered completely with the death of his beloved grandfather. The family was forced to leave their lavish Victorian home, a symbol of stability and comfort, and move to a more modest, humiliating dwelling, For Lovecraft, this was one of the darkest periods of his life. He saw no point in living and seriously contemplated suicide. What stopped him? Not a sudden joy for life, but a lingering desire for knowledge, a flicker of curiosity about how much was still left to explore in the world. It was at the age of 8 that he discovered science. First chemistry, then astronomy, and it was astronomy that would leave the most profound mark. Gazing at the stars, he didn't see friendly constellations or astrological fortunes. He saw an abyss. He grasped, intuitively, the sheer scale of the universe, and in doing so, he understood the utter insignificance of humanity within it. This was not a depressing realization for him, but a terrifyingly sublime one. At school, he was brilliant in all subjects except mathematics, but the pressures mounted. In 1908, he suffered a nervous collapse and dropped out of high school, remaining self-taught for the rest of his life. His relationship with his mother grew more complex, more toxic. She would call him hideous, telling him he should hide from people. He internalized this cruelty, and there are reports that as an adult, he would walk the streets with his face buried in his coat, so no one could gaze upon him. He was becoming a stranger to his own world, an outsider in plain sight. Yet, a turning point came when he was invited to join a group of amateur journalists. For the first time, he found his tribe, like-minded individuals with whom he could share his strange thoughts and elaborate ideas. He became a prolific letter writer, penning an estimated 100,000 letters in his lifetime. These letters are as rich and revealing as his stories, a vast correspondence that built bridges across his profound isolation. But the shadows of his past were long. In 1921, his mother suffered a nervous breakdown and was admitted to the same asylum where his father had died. She died after a surgical operation. Lovecraft was plunged back into that familiar, deep state of sadness and again contemplated suicide. He eventually recovered, and in a brief respite of light, he met and married Sonia Green. They moved to New York, but it was a doomed venture. They faced financial hardship, and Lovecraft found himself alienated and repulsed by the immense, teeming city, full of what he saw as foreigners, his own deep-seated racism and xenophobia, a product of his time and his own insecurities, flared, contributing to his misery. This personal detachment, this feeling of being a stranger in a strange land, would profoundly color the atmosphere of his writing. He returned, defeated, to his beloved Providence, Rhode Island, famously writing, "I am Providence." He lived there, on the verge of poverty, until his death. His great works were published in cheap pulp magazines, often for mere pennies a word, and many remained practically unknown during his lifetime. His health deteriorated, and after months of excruciating pain, he was diagnosed with intestinal cancer. He died in 1937, lightly convinced that his life's work would vanish into the nothingness he so often wrote about. But his friends saw the value in what he had created. They preserved his stories, his letters, his strange and sprawling mythology. And today, he is recognized as one of the most original and influential writers of weird fiction the world has ever seen. So, what is it about his stories that resonates so deeply? They are not, in the conventional sense, about character. The people in Lovecraft's tales are often mere conduits for an overwhelming emotional experience, the experience of confronting the unknown. The bleakness of his vision is strangely refreshing, a cold splash of water on the face of our anthropocentric self-importance. He shifted the source of horror away from the familiar vampires, ghosts, demons and, toward the immense, unplumbed abysses beyond space and time. From his childhood studies of astronomy, He had absorbed the idea of humanity's cosmic insignificance. He understood that the universe, compared to our infinitesimally small Earth, is so vast that from a cosmic perspective, all of human history, our knowledge, our religions, our wars and our loves are completely irrelevant. This is the core of his personal philosophy, which we now call Cosmicism. Cosmicism is a form of extreme existentialism. It posits that there is no divine plan, no inherent meaning, and that humanity is a fleeting accident in a universe that is vast, cold, and utterly indifferent to us. He described us as the miserable denizens of a wretched little fly speck on the back door of a microscopic universe. We are like ants, scurrying about on our tiny mound, completely unaware of the vast realities that exist just beyond the limits of our perception. This philosophy generates a unique kind of fear, not the fear of death or pain, but the fear of what such knowledge can do to the human mind. Lovecraft famously wrote, "The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but some day the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age." For Lovecraft, scientific discovery was not a path to enlightenment, but a potential exterminator of the human spirit. Knowledge is a self-annihilating disease. To glimpse the true nature of reality is to risk having your sanity shattered, to have the very foundations of your understanding of the world turned to dust. He masterfully illustrates this in one of his personal favorite stories, The Color Out of Space. A meteorite crashes on a farm, but it contains no creature, no device, only a color that is indescribable, something never before seen on Earth. This cosmic malady, this mere pigment from the void, poisons the land, the water, the animals, and the minds of the people. It eludes all scientific explanation. It is simply an unknown force, an intrusion from a reality so alien that it upsets the very laws of our perception. The horror is in the realization that there are things from outside our cosmos that retain their external qualities to such a degree that we cannot even properly perceive them, let alone understand them. To craft this sense of the utterly foreign, Lovecraft employed devices that were designed to feel completely alien to the reader. He created a purposely incomplete mythology, a body of lore that hints at a vast, hidden history of the universe, known as the Cthulhu mythos. The word Cthulhu itself is supposed to be a non-human word. Lovecraft suggested the closest pronunciation was a guttural claw, hlu. Unlike traditional monsters, the entities of the mythos are not evil. They are so far beyond humanity that our concepts of good and evil, love and hate, are as relevant to them as the concerns of an ant are to us. They are utterly indifferent, and it is this indifference that creates the profound sense of alienation in his work. They are symbols of cosmic outsideness, and we can only grasp a tiny fraction of their true nature. The horror, then, comes from the realization that the common human laws, interests, and emotions that form the bedrock of our lives have no validity, significance in the vast cosmos large. The mythos is populated by a hierarchy of bizarre entities, the elder things for the first alien species to colonize Earth 1 billion years ago. They created the Shoggoths, protoplasmic, shape-shifting beings as slaves to build their vast cities. In his novella, At the Mountains of Madness, a group of explorers in Antarctica stumbles upon the ruins of one of these cities and encounters a Shoggoth. Lovecraft describes it as, "It was a terrible, indescribable thing vaster than any subway train, as shapeless congeries of protoplasmic bubbles, faintly self-luminous, and with myriads of temporary ice forming and unforming as pustules of greenish light all over the tunnel-filling front that bore down upon us. Then there are the great old ones, a group of unique, immortal beings who were once rulers and gods of the earth. They now reside in a state of stagnant eternity in various hidden locations. The most famous of these is Cthulhu himself, a monster of vaguely humanoid shape, but with an octopus-like head, a creature whose very form seems to defy our understanding of biology. He lies in a death-like slumber in the sunken city of Lair, a mountain walked or stumbled. He's sleeping yet eternal, dead yet alive. The cryptic couplet associated with him captures this impossible existence that is not dead, which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. While he sleeps, he communicates with humanity through dreams, a source of constant, low-level anxiety at the unconscious level. A global cult chants his praises. In his house at Lair, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. The cult believes that when the stars are right, the city will rise, and the great old ones will awaken. But they pray for their own demise, unbeknownst to them. For these entities are beyond any human conception of good, an evil dot in the shadow over Innsmouth. Lovecraft introduces the Deep Ones, an amphibious humanoid race that dwells in the ocean depths, and has a disturbing affinity for mating with humans. They worship Dagon, a powerful entity of the deep. But above even these are the outer gods, cosmic entities that exist beyond the very confines of our universe. The most notable include Yog-Sothoth, a conglomeration of glowing spheres who is coterminous with all of time and space. He is the gate and the guardian of the gate. Past, present, future, all are one in Yog-Sothoth. To worship him is to seek forbidden knowledge, a path that invariably leads to madness. Shub Niggurath, referred to as the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young, a kind of fecund, monstrous life force. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. Unlike the others, he is active on earth, often walking among us in human guise. He is a trickster, a messenger, and a manipulator, a go-between for humanity and the utterly incomprehensible outer gods. He reminds us of the existence of that which we cannot truly know. And finally, Azathoth, the blind idiot god. He's the most powerful being in the mythos, the mindless, unconscious creator of all existence. The entire universe is merely a part of his dream. Countless lesser deities play maddening tunes on flutes and drums to keep him asleep, for if he were to awaken, all of existence would instantly cease to be. He's the embodiment of chaos, existing beyond all human concepts, even the concept of destruction. Crucially, these gods are never the focal point of Lovecraft's stories. They are always in the background, a pervasive presence. This is a key element of cosmic horror. The threat is not a villain with a plan, but an ambient condition of the universe. To express the geometry of this alien reality, Lovecraft turned to mathematical concepts. He described landscapes and architectures that were abnormal, non-Euclidean, and loathsomely redolent of spheres and dimensions apart from ours. He had an intuitive grasp of how a fourth-dimensional geometry might appear to our three-dimensional minds all wrong, with angles that were acute but behaved as if they were obtuse. A character might be swallowed up by an angle of masonry which shouldn't have been there. His descriptions of creatures like Cthulhu fit perfectly with what a four-dimensional being might look like if it intersected with our space, a shape that was not made of matter as we understand it, constantly shifting, impossible to fix in perception. It is like an ant living on a two-dimensional plane suddenly encountering a human hand. The ant cannot process it. It simply sees a strange, fleshy, bony mass that appears and disappears from its reality without warning. Similarly, Lovecraft's entities exist in dimensions beyond our own, and we can only perceive them when they choose to intersect with our world. He writes of scenes where objects, both organic and inorganic, are totally beyond description. Gilman sometimes compared the inorganic masses to prisms, labyrinths, clusters of cubes and planes, and cyclopean buildings, and the organic things struck him variously as groups of bubbles, octopi, centipedes, living Hindu idols, and intricate arabesques roused into a kind of Ophidian animation. Entities would appear and disappear out of empty space with no warning. His world evades any clear visualization, and this is intentional. We can only hint at its terrors with our limited language and knowledge, which only adds to the uncanniness. If we were to be confronted by such a creature, we would be powerless. We cannot perceive them unless they allow it. They could watch our every move, while we see nothing. We are entirely at their mercy. The true horror is the disorientation and anxiety that comes from having the very fabric of space, time, and physics, the reliable laws of our reality, warp into something completely unknown. This touches on a deep human need. When we do not know something, we feel compelled to create an answer. Who created the universe? What happens after death? We invent gods and afterlives and philosophies because we cannot bear the silence, the void of not knowing. Lovecraft's characters often seek to fill that void with forbidden knowledge, only to have the revelation destroy them. The most famous of his fictional grimoires is the Necronomicon, written by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazard. The pursuit of this knowledge is a kind of self-annihilation. To come to know a certain reality can result in the full or partial destruction of the self. There is a parallel here to a profound personal revelation, such as receiving a terrible medical diagnosis. What was not known is made known, and the knowledge itself is horrific because it reshapes your entire reality. Once the presence of the disease is known, it becomes a part of you. There is no resisting such a revelation. There is no going back. Lovecraft also had a lifelong fascination with dreams, which he saw as a window into the unknown. The unconscious mind symbolizes the archetype of the unknown. In his dream cycle stories, such as the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadeth, he presents the dreamlands as a vast, alternate dimension that can be entered through sleep, a realm of wonder, but also a forbidden knowledge and forces beyond human understanding. His stories are so potent, so bizarre, that they can strip the average reader of all their preconceptions about reality and even their sense of self. In his tales, the characters who most fear the loss of their individuality, who cling most tightly to their idea of a separate, unique self, are the ones who fall into madness. This introduces the crucial concept of otherness. Lovecraft's work, perhaps unintentionally, leads us to a profound philosophical conclusion. The quality of being different, of being the other, must be integrated. The self and the other are not enemies. They are to be simultaneously accepted. This is beautifully illustrated in the story Through the Gates of the Silver Key. The protagonist, Randolph Carter, uses the mysterious silver key to unlock the ultimate gate guarded by Yog-Sothoth. There, he doesn't just see his past and future lives. He begins to see countless versions of himself, Carters in every known and suspected age of Earth's history. All these Carters are equally himself. He sees how each small decision he made created a new branch, a new Carter on a different timeline. This omniscient awareness leads to a loss of individuality. He learns that he is no longer a single, definite being, distinct from all others. The boundary between self and other dissolves. The French philosopher Gilles Deleuze described this as a transformation from paranoia to schizo-madness, using these terms not as clinical diagnoses, but as philosophical metaphors for perceptions of identity. The paranoid individual has an urgent need to align everything with their own rigid identity and to reject otherness. Schizo-madness, in this context, refers to the integration of the unconscious, the acceptance of other identities, other beings, and one's own simultaneous existence among them. This is reminiscent of Carl Jung's process of individuation, where one integrates the unconscious contents of the mind, the shadow, the animus to become a more whole, complete self. To do this, one must accept the loss of the ego's total control. One must acknowledge that one is not the sole master of one's own internal house. Through the act of reading Lovecraft, the reader undergoes their own anti-human becoming. We are invited to step outside the narrow prison of our human perspective. A window into otherness opens, and we are forced to confront a terrifying truth. The monster we fear is, in a fundamental way, none other than a part of ourselves, the part we have repressed, the part we don't understand, the vast, unconscious cosmos within. The true horror, then, is not the monster out there, but our own resistance to this integration. The only monster we are truly meant to conquer is our own fear of the unknown, both without and within. This brings us to one of Lovecraft's most poignant and personal stories, The Outsider. It tells of a man who has lived his entire life in solitude, in a decaying, dark castle. He cannot recall ever seeing another living person. Driven by a desperate yearning for light and connection, he decides to climb the great tower of his prison, to glimpse the outer sky. Even if it kills him, he finds a window and climbs through, entering a grand hall. There, he's met with a party of people, but their faces are instantly hideously distorted with fear. They scream and flee from him. Trembling, he wonders what horrific thing must be lurking near him that he cannot see. And then he sees it, a reflection in a great sheet of glass. I know always that I am an outsider, a stranger in this century, and among those who are still men. This I have known ever since I stretched out my fingers to the abomination within that great gilded frame, stretched out my fingers and touched a cold and unyielding surface of polished glass. The monster he feared was his own reflection. He was the outsider all along. We all, in our own ways, living castles of our own making, built from our assumptions, our identities, our fears of the unknown. We project our anxieties onto the void, giving them form as monsters and demons. But Lovecraft's cosmic horror, at its deepest level, asks us to consider a more terrifying and liberating possibility. What if the void is not hostile, but indifferent? What if the unknown is not something to be conquered, but something to be acknowledged? What if the greatest act of courage is not to fight the darkness, but to sit quietly within it, to accept our profound insignificance, and in doing so, to find a strange, cold comfort? For in acknowledging that we are but a fleeting dream in the mind of a blind, idiot God, we are freed from the burden of ultimate meaning. We are released to create our own small, fragile meanings in love, in art, in the simple act of looking up at the stars without demanding that they answer us. The universe does not care, and in that very uncaring, there is a form of grace. It allows us to be exactly what we are, temporary, beautiful, conscious stardust, brave enough to feel fear, and wise enough to not let it be the only thing we feel. The true journey is not outward, into the cosmos, but inward, through the gates of our own silver key, to accept the infinite stranger we call the self.